Okay, so we already talked about how slavery is already beginning to cause issues within the United States. What I want to talk about very briefly is what some of the things the United States is going to do about it. And probably the biggest thing is they're going to do their very best to maintain the status quo to preserve the Union. All right, and this is especially seen in the early days of the Republic. The South really didn't fear for their peculiar institution. They figured that slavery was safely enshrined in the Constitution and within federal law, and they could do pretty much whatever they wanted to and not have to really worry about it because the population in the South, mostly slaves, guaranteed that the South controlled the House of Representatives. You may remember under our constitutional system, all laws must begin in the legislative. Our legislative branch is the only ones who can make new laws. The executive branch signs the laws and then puts them into action, and the judges interpret the laws. But it's the legislative branch that creates these new laws. And our legislative branch has a House of Representatives, which is based on population, and a Senate, which is based on 2 senators from every state. Okay, so the South controlled the House of Representatives because of population. But then immigration. Yes, immigration. And people were not moving to the South because there wasn't a lot of factories. There weren't places for them to work. And many times they weren't necessarily welcomed. And so what happens is immigration pushes the population of the North to be really, really big compared to the South, as much as 4 times the size of the South, which means that by 1810 or so, the South had lost control of the House of Representatives. That the North and the interests and economic interests, the factories, the industrialization, things like this, they now controlled the House of Representatives. So the South, in order to preserve slavery, really focuses on we have to make sure that we control or at least maintain a balance within the United States Senate. And so one of the things that they're going to do is they're going to push for the addition of new slave states. Well, the first test practice for this is going to be the Missouri Territory. And whatever they do in the Missouri Territory, they're just going to copy in Arkansas and Louisiana and some of these other places like this. But the Missouri Territory, they wanted it to be a slave state. Well, by this time, people in the North were sufficiently abolitionist, anti-slavery, that they didn't want they didn't want more slave states. And so they pushed against it. This is going to lead to something called the Missouri Compromise. And the Missouri Compromise gets a lot of attention because it's really the United States' first attempt to deal with slavery, and they do a very bad job of their decision of how do we deal with slavery is we're not going to deal with slavery. We're going to kind of keep things in balance and leave things as they are. So the decision for the Missouri Compromise is basically boils down to this. Okay, Missouri will be admitted as a slave state, and slavery will be preserved below a magic line called the 3630 line. That's 36 degrees, 30 minutes north. It's a latitude line, and it's going to stretch all the way across. And if you're wondering where it is, it's the northern border of Texas. There's a reason for that. Okay, so that slavery will be able to be preserved south of that line. So any new territories, excuse me, any new territories that become states, if they're below that line, that they will be considered slave states. They'll be open to slavery. And if they're north of that line, then they won't. Now, this, of course, immediately creates a problem because Missouri is north of that line. So here we have this compromise, and we're starting to make exceptions for it. And so Missouri's southern border is the 3630 line. So they take a couple counties away from Arkansas, give them to Missouri so that Missouri has this little foot, like this little anchor coming down. And that little anchor then is going to firmly anchor them to the south and to the slave territories. Another thing that's going to come along with the Missouri Compromise is this idea that we're going to bring states in 2 at a time. One north of the 3630 line, and thus no slavery, and one below the 3630 line, thus pro-slavery. In the case of Missouri, Missouri was balanced out by the state of Maine. That came in about a few months after Missouri came in. But after that, we're going to see things that are going to have to come in as a balance, and so we're going to constantly. So as a result, states that are territories that are ready to come in as states are going to have to wait until like Arkansas is going to have to wait till Michigan is ready to come in as a state, and so they're going to come in together. And the idea is that since the Southerners cannot control the House of Representatives, they will instead control the United States Senate, or at least preserve, because in order for a law to go into effect, it has to be passed by the House of Representatives and by the Senate. So, all right, until then, I'll talk to you later, and in class we'll read some of the things that people were saying against slavery, and also read some of the things that people were saying in favor of slavery. Bye-bye.